I always knew when Sunday dinner was about to turn cruel. It wasn't announced. It arrived quietly, right after the plates were set and everyone felt comfortable enough to be honest. That kind of honesty that doesn't care who it hurts. The dining room smelled like rosemary and roasted chicken, the same scent that had filled our house my entire childhood. The table was polished, the glasses perfectly aligned, and my parents sat at the head like judges presiding over something I never volunteered to stand trial for. I took my usual seat near the end, where I could shrink without being accused of sulking. "So," my mother said, adjusting her napkin, her smile practiced and polite, "how's everyone doing?" My brother jumped in immediately, like he always did. He talked about meetings, investments, numbers that impressed my parents because they sounded important, even if they didn't fully understand them. He spoke loudly, confidently, the way people do when they've never had to doubt their place in the world. Then the question came. It always came. "And you?" my father asked, glancing at me briefly. "What are you up to these days?" I opened my mouth, but my brother beat me to it. "She's still working on her little hobby," he said with a laugh, cutting into his chicken. "You know, that online thing she's obsessed with." The table erupted in soft laughter. Not cruel enough to call out. Not kind enough to ignore. I smiled automatically. Years of practice had taught my face what to do even when my chest tightened. I lowered my eyes to my plate, pretending the mashed potatoes were fascinating. "Hobby," my mother repeated, shaking her head. "She's always been imaginative." Imaginative. That was their word for irresponsible. I wanted to say something. I wanted to explain that my hobby kept me awake until dawn. That it paid salaries. That people depended on it. That it was bigger than anything they had ever believed I could be. But I remembered the last time I tried. My father had leaned back in his chair and said, "Real careers don't hide behind laptops." So I swallowed my words with my food. Across the table, my brother smirked. He loved this part, the part where he got to be the example. The success story. The proof that our parents had done something right. I wasn't angry at him. Not exactly. I was tired. Tired of shrinking. Tired of being the punchline. Tired of pretending I didn't bleed every time they laughed at the thing that had saved me. Because while they thought I was wasting time, that little hobby had given me purpose when I felt invisible. It had given me control when everything else felt uncertain. I watched the empty chair beside my brother, the one reserved for his fiancée tonight. She hadn't arrived yet, and I didn't know her well. I only knew she was wealthy, powerful, admired. The kind of woman my family respected instantly. Someone my parents would listen to. Someone who didn't laugh at ambition. As the laughter faded and conversation shifted away from me, I exhaled slowly. I reminded myself of the truth I kept locked inside my chest like a secret treasure. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their belief. One day, the truth would introduce itself. And it wouldn't be quiet. The front door opened just as my mother was refilling the glasses, and the sound of heels against hardwood cut through the room with sharp, confident precision. Everyone looked up at once. My brother straightened in his chair, smoothing his shirt, already smiling in a way that was different from how he smiled at the rest of us. "She's here," he announced, unnecessarily. His fiancée stepped into the dining room like she belonged there, like the house had been waiting for her. She wore elegance effortlessly, not loudly. Her dress was simple, tailored to perfection, and the diamond on her finger caught the light when she reached out to greet my parents. It wasn't flashy, just unmistakably expensive. My mother practically glowed as she hugged her. My father shook her hand with respect I rarely saw him offer so quickly. This was the kind of person they understood immediately. Money spoke a language they never questioned. Introductions circled the table, and when her eyes landed on me, my brother gestured vaguely in my direction. "That's my sister," he said. "She lives differently." I stood and offered a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." She studied me for a second longer than necessary, not rudely, curiously. Then she smiled back, warm but observant, like someone who noticed details others missed. Dinner resumed with renewed energy. The conversation turned louder, sharper, orbiting around success, connections, and achievements. My brother basked in it, telling stories about boardrooms and deals, embellishing where he could. My parents listened with pride, nodding like his words confirmed their life choices. I stayed quiet. I had learned that silence protected me from becoming entertainment. At some point, my mother leaned toward my brother's fiancé and lowered her voice, though not nearly enough. "Our daughter has always been creative," she said, gesturing toward me with her fork. "But she never wanted a traditional career." My brother chuckled. "Yeah, she's got this hobby. Something online." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The fiancé didn't laugh. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "Online how?" she asked. My brother waved his hand dismissively. "Startups, websites, ideas. You know how these things go." Her gaze shifted to me again, sharper now. "What do you actually do?" she asked. The table quieted, not out of respect, but expectation, waiting for my answer to be amusing. "I build technology companies," I said evenly. A soft laugh rippled around the table. But she leaned forward. "Which space?" she asked. "Consumer? Infrastructure? AI?" My brother frowned. "She's exaggerating." "I'm not," I said quietly, meeting her eyes for the first time without flinching. Something changed then. Her curiosity deepened. She didn't look at me like a joke or a dreamer. She looked at me like a puzzle. "What's your company called?" she asked. I hesitated, not because I was ashamed, but because saying it out loud in this room felt dangerous. Still, I said it. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her expression shifted, not into confusion, but recognition. The noise of the room faded around us as she stared at me, eyes widening just slightly, as if she were staring at a ghost she never expected to meet at a family dinner. "Wait," she said slowly. "You're that founder?" The laughter died mid-breath. And for the first time in my life, the table wasn't laughing at me, it was holding its breath. For a moment, no one spoke. The room seemed to shrink, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to hear her next words. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the doorway, each second louder than the last. My brother let out a short laugh, sharp and uncertain, the kind people use when they're trying to wrestle control back from a moment that's slipping away. "You're mistaken," he said quickly. "She's not." The fiancé's fork slipped from her fingers. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't crash loudly. It simply clinked against the plate and rolled slightly, but that small sound cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. My mother's hand hovered in the air, my father's eyes fixed on the fallen fork as if it were evidence of something he didn't want to examine. "I'm not mistaken," she said calmly, though her voice carried a new weight. She turned fully toward me now, as if the rest of the table no longer existed. "You're the founder who declined our acquisition offer last year." My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. "Yes," I said. "I didn't think it was the right time." Her lips parted in a smile, part disbelief, part admiration. "You have any idea how rare that is?" My brother pushed his chair back slightly. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're talking about $1 billion company." She didn't even look at him. "It is," she replied. "And she built it quietly." The silence was no longer awkward. It was heavy. Thick. It pressed down on everyone who had laughed just minutes ago. My father finally spoke. "Is this true?" I met his eyes, steady and calm. "I told you years ago what I was doing. You just didn't listen." His mouth opened, then closed again. The fiancée straightened in her chair, composed, professional. "I've been trying to meet you for over a year," she said to me. "Your work changed how our entire sector operates. We reference your models in our internal strategy meetings." My mother's face had gone pale. That's not possible, she whispered. She works from her bedroom. I smiled gently. I work wherever I need to. The fiancé laughed softly, not unkindly. That's usually how founders like her operate. She stood then, pushing her chair back with purpose. Everyone watched her, unsure whether they were about to be embarrassed or rescued. She walked around the table and stopped beside me. Up close, I could see her clearly now, the intelligence behind her eyes, the respect in her posture. She extended her hand. Nice to finally meet you, she said. Then, with a small smile that felt like justice wrapped in silk, she added, "Boss." The word hung in the air. My brother looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. My parents sat frozen, their world quietly rearranging itself in real time. Years of assumptions cracked, then shattered, in the span of one sentence. I didn't gloat. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, the truth was speaking for me, and it was louder than their laughter had ever been. I glanced around the table, at the people who once reduced my dreams to a joke. I felt no anger. Just clarity. The power in the room had shifted. And everyone felt it. No one rushed to speak after that. The silence stretched, fragile and unfamiliar, like a glass ornament no one dared touch. I could feel every pair of eyes on me now, not dismissive, not amused, but uncertain. The kind of uncertainty that comes when a story you've told yourself for years suddenly collapses. My mother was the first to move. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling just enough to notice. I didn't know, she said softly, as if ignorance could excuse years of laughter. You never explained. I didn't respond right away. I watched the condensation slide down my own glass, steady and slow. I did, I said finally. You just decided it didn't sound important. My father cleared his throat, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. Why didn't you tell us how big it was? I met his gaze. Because size was never the problem. Respect was. My brother stared at me, anger and disbelief fighting behind his eyes. So you just let us think. I let you think whatever you wanted, I said calmly. I was busy building something. The fiancé, no, the woman who had changed everything, sat back down, composed once more. She didn't hide, she said evenly. You just weren't looking. That was when the apologies started. Awkward. Late. Heavy with regret. They landed at my feet like offerings I didn't know what to do with. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. I stood, smoothing my coat, and the movement alone seemed to startle them. For once, I wasn't leaving to escape, I was leaving because I had outgrown the room. I'm not angry, I said, and meant it. But I won't shrink anymore to make you comfortable. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father nodded slowly, as if trying to memorize this version of me, the one who didn't ask permission to exist. At the door, the fiancé followed. I'd still like to talk, she said quietly. About partnership. On your terms. I smiled. We'll schedule something. Behind us, the dining room stayed silent. No laughter. No jokes. Just the echo of everything they had missed. As I stepped outside, the cool night air filled my lungs. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had proven them wrong, but because I no longer needed to prove anything at all. I realized then that revenge didn't have to be loud. It didn't need humiliation or sharp words. Sometimes, it was just truth arriving late, and undeniable. Inside that house, they would replay the night again and again, the fork dropping, the word boss, the moment their daughter stopped being invisible. And me? I walked forward, exactly where I had always been going. Unapologetically. Quietly. Powerfully.